And welcome back to the OffMessage pod. I'm Henry Parkhurst, and this is your favorite pollster's favorite pollster, Sam K. And today we're back with another edition coming to you live from OnMessage HQ just outside of DC. It's been a little bit since we've been on live with everyone. So shout out to the 72 of you all who watched episode 1 about a month ago, especially my grandmother. I think she's like half of those views, but Nana was really interested in you. So
Thank you, Nana.
I think she's looking forward to this next one. But, you know, I can only imagine the 72 people who watched are dearly missing us and need a little bit of a life update from you. So, Sam, anything you want to let the viewers know, anything to report on about your summer?
Yeah, well, so the people have been asking for an update. And so did a little travel this summer in July, was in Vermont, was in Detroit, I was in Kentucky. But, you know, Nana, I know you've been asking. The big update, yes, I have a girlfriend. I'm not sorry about it, ladies. Samantha, who also happened to cut my hair yesterday, and she did a phenomenal job, I think, is a beautiful girl. Very excited to be dating her, and hopefully we date for a long time because the internet is forever. So that's now out there. But that's pretty much my update. But I think you have a pretty big, serious financial move that you just made.
Yeah, I did the scariest thing that I've maybe ever done in my life besides like talking to a girl. Just this past week, I bought my first car. So I got myself a sexy little Toyota Camry Hybrid 2025. So it's got the nice little rims on it.
Hybrid.
Hybrid.
Yes.
I need that fuel economy for
No,
the commute.
this is a big thing.
It's a financial decision. My dad told me it's the car of millionaires. He read an article about it because the people who buy the Camry have the economic vision that it's going to save them the fuel economy. It's got great resale value.
I mean, it's a sexy car.
I like it. I like it sitting out there. You know, maybe we take it for a spin later.
It's not really the love wagon of the Ford Flex that I drive.
Well, no one has that.
But it doesn't have the fuel economy of the Toyota Camry.
What are you getting 14 these days?
Yeah, I'm getting like 13 and a half miles, 0 to 60 in 45 minutes. So it's pretty good.
There we go. But yeah, so it was the most amount of money I've ever seen leave my bank account at one time, which was pretty scary.
Probably scary, yeah.
But you know, I had to make that decision alone, and by alone I mean my dad was standing over the shoulder, helping me with the negotiation, making sure I wasn't getting screwed.
Good.
Which was great. I kind of like looked over to him. I was like, do I really need this package? And so it was a scary decision, but I'm really happy that I ended up making it. But I was talking to my friends about it because I think a lot of people sort of in our generation, in our phase of life, have started to have to make these sorts of financial decisions, whether it's buying their first car or buying a home. And so I talked to my friends who you know are now out of school or have been working for a little bit, and they're telling me that these economic questions are becoming top concerns about them when they're voting.
Yeah. I think we had high inflation for months on end during the Biden administration. We've had sustained higher prices as a result. And you're talking about the home buying. We used to have, I think 30, 40 years ago, the average first-time home buyer, the age of that person was like 27, 28, and now it's like 37, 38. So the financial window to really starting your life has advanced about 10 years. And when our parents were, beginning their families, they were having kids earlier, they were getting married earlier, and they were buying homes and making those big decisions. But they could do it.
Right.
You could afford to have a family and have a home on one income. And now as the median salary has gone up at a lower rate at the same time as the houses have gone up much faster, people aren't able to start their homes and so start their families. And so you had to make this big financial decision in buying a car, and it's kind of the first step, I'd say, in adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, it was like most of my savings up until this point went into buying that car.
Right.
And I guess, the next thing is my savings for the next 5 years of my life are all focused on buying a home. And I was talking to my friends about this because I feel myself, and I know, especially working in this industry, we're not supposed to say that we're single issue voters, but I feel like day by day, I become closer to being a single issue voter on candidates who are going to help me reach that goal.
Right.
Because that's the next big milestone in my life. All politics is personal, and I'd be lying to myself if I said there was something more important to me than this future goal of being able to have a home, raise a family, and afford to do all of that stuff. And I think there's this big misconception that young people are focused on other things besides that. And I think politicians, particularly on the left, have been trying to message to young people, oh, well, you care about threats to democracy more than that. You care about abortion more than that. You care about healthcare more than that. But I don't think whether it's the bone pull or the actual numbers that really proves out.
I think big part of the reason why Trump won under 35-year-old men was the economic message. It was, he was running on, I think, a lot of things, but immigration, a strong economy, the no tax on tips, things like that. And that really resonated with a younger generation that doesn't see an economic future for themselves. It's like they see their parents who own homes, and the boomers who own homes and have, strong financial situations. And then us, our generation, where we just don't see a future. We don't see home buying. I don't see home buying in my future. I live in DC, and I think I could afford a home, but would it make sense to, with the space and with what I want for my future, if I want to have a wife with a couple kids, like, does it make sense to buy a cramped 1-bedroom in a crappy part of DC? So I got to wait it out a little bit. And I think it's one of the big reasons that Trump resonated and Kamala didn't was because he spoke directly about the economic future of America, whereas Kamala Harris kind of just said, Trump is bad, Trump is bad. And so I think that's why we saw some of this shift, is particularly among young men.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should put some polling data up on the screen that sort of backs up this claim. So if you look over my shoulder here, we've got on our big screen. This is from a national survey that we took from October 28th to 30th, 2024. So truly the last moment before the election. On the survey, we ask, what do you think the most important issue to deciding your vote is going to be? And we give them this is a closed-end question. For context here, we interviewed 800 national voters with an oversample of about 400, 500 voters in contested states. So those are swing states across the country. So this is a pretty robust sample.
And closed end is we offer them options.
Right. And so, sometimes we'll do it, we'll ask it just any sort of verbatim response work. But this time we put it into categories to see sort of where the dividing lines are on this. So we gave them options. We gave them options like inflation and economy, threats to democracy, immigration, border security, healthcare, abortion, crime and safety. So we're not really, I'd say, yes, we give them a list here, but this isn't like we're pigeonholing them into forcing them to pick our options. We pick a host of issues that Republicans are generally considered better on. We picked a host of issues that Democrats were considered better on and have been campaigning on. And the results were overwhelming on this. We saw 43% of Americans said that inflation and the economy were their top issue. And I believe second place wasn't even particularly close.
Yeah, it looks like democracy came in at 15 to 20%, depending on the demographic. But I think it's pretty simple, and this is almost always the case, which is it's the economy. Stupid. So, we really need to be communicating an economic message to voters. And I think when you forget about that, and that's not a core central part of your campaign, you lose a lot of voters. And because of what you're speaking about with your personal experience with the car and what our friends are seeing and my experience with wanting to buy a home, I think this is going to be a problem that voters care about for the foreseeable future. I don't see this changing. I think when you do have these crises that come up, like when COVID happened, or when inflation particularly was really bad, or when immigration was particularly really bad, we see on the most important issue facing the country question, some of those things pop, like COVID kind of bubbled up during COVID as a really big issue. But still, it was always the economy. We had COVID going on, but we also had 30% unemployment. And so a lot of Americans were saying their number one issue was the economy. So,
well, if our star intern Gretchen would flip it over to the next slide for me, I think what I really want to have hammered home though is it's not just all Americans are saying this. Young Americans are saying it at the same level of intensity. 44% of Americans aged 18 or likely voters aged 18 to 29 on our survey said that inflation and economy were their top issue. And I think that sort of defies this conventional logic about. Maybe not conventional logic, but this sort of media narrative that young people are focused on, a more left-leaning set of issues, that they're really responsive to these talking points that Democrats were trying to reach out to them with, whether it was something related to universal healthcare, whether it was related to abortion access, or that Trump was going to be this massive threat to the democracy. I think those were three buckets that they spent a lot of dollars in their campaigns on. And you just see in our data that that's not where the young voters were.
Right. The young voters clearly care about inflation economy. And I think someone on the left who maybe is paving a path for Democrats there would be like a guy like Zohran Mamdani. So Zohran wins this Democrat primary in New York City, and he wins on this kind of socialist economic message, like a people first, New York first socialist message. And I remember when he won on the election night in the primary, there was this FDR quote going around, or I'm going to summarize it and botch it, but basically it was like, if capitalism stops working for Americans, they won't believe in capitalism anymore. Right. And so it's incumbent on us as Republican capitalist conservatives to make sure that this hollowed out middle class that America has right now feels like the economy is working for them.
Definitely, definitely. And if Gretchen, you can flip us to our last slide here. I think, the polling data shows that Republicans are still better positioned than Democrats on this message, despite this mom-dummy wave. I think that mainly probably is chalked up to the fact that despite the fact that he's talking about the economy, people don't really buy his solutions. But CNN released a poll back in May that just showed the state of the field on this. Republicans have a +7 advantage on the economy per their poll. And I think that's maybe a little light because, in our polling, we've seen that number closer to +10, +11 on that. But I think it's an important reminder for Republicans, though, that this is a bread and butter issue for you. This is a staple that they are wanting to hear from you. And it's an area that our voters trust us on. And so if we lose sight of that, though, if Democrats refocus on it and we lose sight of it, there could be some problems. But I think overall, my personal experience, your personal experience, and what the data is telling us is that young people are going to continue to care about this issue, and the Republicans have an advantage, and that our message in everything that we talk to our voters about has to be centered in inflation and the economy.
It's the economy, stupid.